She's a pathetic failure, but her dead husband's money makes her useful. She should be grateful to us, my biological mother's voice. Lorraine. Sharp and dry, bleeding through my phone at 11:40 p.m., slicing straight into my pitch-black kitchen. My Aunt Carol had accidentally pocket-dialed me from their family dinner, and the open line sat glowing on my counter while every single person at that table tore into me like I was already dead. Laughter erupted right after. Not a nervous chuckle. Not an awkward giggle someone quickly swallowed. A genuine, full-bellied, bone-chilling roar. The easy, satisfied laughter of people who were absolutely certain their meal ticket would never fight back. I could hear forks scraping plates. I could hear ice cubes clinking in glasses I had paid for. I could hear my brother Wade snorting through his nose the way he always did when he thought he had gotten away with something. I sat in dead silence. Still in my Marine Corps combat uniform, mud from a field exercise caked dry on my trouser hems. The black coffee in my grip had gone ice cold. I locked my jaw until my back teeth ground flat. I pressed my thumb against the steel barrel of my tactical pen and held it there, feeling the cold metal bite into my skin. I did not cry. I did not move. I sat in that dark kitchen and let every word, every laugh, every syllable of contempt soak straight into my bones. My jaw tightened. I set the phone down, screen still alive, and stared at the banking app icon glowing on my home screen. In exactly 36 hours, the next payment was due. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like this video and let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Because to understand how I financially obliterated them, you first need to see how they trapped me 6 years ago. The glowing screen finally went black. The kitchen swallowed every trace of light, and the only sound left was the rhythmic click of my tactical pen. Click, click, click. My thumb worked the trigger release without thinking, the metallic snap anchoring me to the edge of my chair while my mind dragged itself 6 years backward. That repetitive cold sound hauled me out of the present and dropped me straight into the sterile, freezing office of a bank loan manager in our hometown. My husband Frank had been dead for 11 days. An Air Force training crash in the Nevada desert had reduced my entire marriage to a folded flag, a 3-volley salute, and a government death gratuity deposited into an account I could barely look at. I was 28 years old, and I had already buried the only man who ever treated me like a human being. But while I choked on grief in a base housing unit 3 states away, my biological family was dealing with a far more practical crisis. My dad had left behind a massive secret mortgage on the family home before he died of a heart attack 2 years prior. Foreclosure notices stamped in aggressive red ink were piling up on the kitchen counter. My mom Lorraine had not worked a single day in 35 years. She could not spell the word refinance, let alone execute one. I sat across from the loan officer in my service dress uniform, my spine locked rigid to keep myself from collapsing under the weight of 11 sleepless nights. The fluorescent light hummed above my head. The air conditioner blasted frigid air directly onto the back of my neck. The bank manager did not care about my dead husband. He did not care about the nightmares, or the cold sweat, or the way I flinched at every sudden noise. He shuffled through a stack of foreclosure documents with the mechanical indifference of a man processing inventory, and he only saw one viable name in our entire bloodline capable of clearing the debt. Mine. I had a flawless credit history, a stable officer's salary, and a massive government death gratuity freshly deposited into my account. My mom sat beside me in that office, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, performing the role of the overwhelmed widow with the precision of an actress who had rehearsed her lines for decades. She did not bring a single financial document. She did not ask a single question about interest rates or repayment terms. She simply sat there waiting for me to do what she had always expected me to do: fix it. I slid the paperwork across the desk without hesitation. I bought the house. My name was permanently stamped in bold ink on the deed. I signed the new mortgage contract, deliberately shackling myself to hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because the military taught me one thing above all else: you never leave your unit behind. I refused to let my mom get thrown into the streets in the exact same year I buried the only man I ever loved. She squeezed my arm in the parking lot afterward and told me I was a good daughter. It was the last time she ever said anything kind to my face. I mistakenly assumed that monumental sacrifice would forge an unbreakable bond. I assumed wrong. Within months of the ink drying on that deed, my mom completely erased my name from the story of her own survival. At neighborhood barbecues, she would stand proudly on the porch I paid for sipping iced tea and project her voice loud enough for the entire block to hear. I took care of the issues with the bank for this house. She would boast, waving her hand in the air like she was shooing a fly. She painted herself as the resilient, independent widow who had single-handedly shielded her family from financial ruin. The neighbors clapped. The church ladies nodded with admiration. Not a single person at those gatherings ever asked whose name was actually printed on the legal deed. Acknowledging my ownership meant acknowledging they were all living off the charity of the daughter they constantly belittled. That truth was far too expensive for any of them to afford. I let them keep their pathetic illusion. I stepped back into the shadows and functioned as their invisible logistics officer, the same way I managed supply chains for combat units overseas. Every single month, a massive chunk of my military pay automatically routed straight to the bank, keeping a roof over the heads of people who deeply resented my independence. I justified it the way soldiers justify every sacrifice necessary cost for the mission. Tactical compromise for the greater objective. I stopped clicking my pen. The metallic sound halted in my dark kitchen. 6 years of automatic transfers. 6 years of silence. My generosity had not bought love. It had not bought respect. It had simply funded their arrogance and subsidized their cruelty. The house was only the foundation of their parasitic empire. Once my family realized my bank account was an open supply line that never requested reinforcements, their emergencies began multiplying like rounds in a firefight. First, it was my brother Wade. His so-called business collapsed within 8 months of launch because he spent more time drinking at the bar than managing his books. The bank prepared to repossess his heavy-duty truck, the only shiny toy he had left to flex at his drinking buddies. I was deployed at a sweltering forward operating base overseas, chewing on grit and rationing bottled water when his text hit my encrypted phone. Transfer the money fast, I'm stuck. No greeting, no explanation, no please, just a demand and a routing number. I logged into my banking app, squinting at the screen through a film of dust and sweat, typed in his information, and cleared his arrears without a single word of complaint. Next came my sister Megan. She weaponized her own children to breach my defenses. Her voice cracked through the phone receiver at 2 a.m, a hysterical gulping sob that rattled in my ear while I sat on the edge of a canvas cot in a plywood barracks. Audrey, you can't let them pull the kids from their school. Haley stopped eating. They cry every single night asking why Daddy left. And the counselor said moving them now will cause permanent emotional scarring. I could hear the children breathing quietly in the background, already asleep, completely unaware their mother was using their futures as a crowbar to pry open my wallet. The children were innocent. They did not choose their mother. They did not deserve to be collateral damage in her war of laziness. I signed the checks. Then came the luxury apartment rent, because Megan refused to move into anything below her standard. She swore she only needed 1 year to find a job and get back on her feet. That single year quietly metastasized into 4 grueling years, and in all that time she never submitted a single job application. Hovering above it all was my mom's endless barrage of invoices, sky-high utility bills, premium health insurance premiums, spa treatments that cost more than my monthly food budget on deployment, and in a twist of sickening irony, the property taxes for the very house I legally owned. On the first of every single month, I executed my financial ritual with the precision of a guard shift change. I opened my Excel spreadsheet, cross-referenced the numbers against their latest round of demands, and authorized the transfers. Click transfer confirm. Click transfer confirm. The mindless digital flow of my blood money straight into their pockets. I funded their entire existence while I slept on canvas cots, ate vacuum-sealed rations, and showered with a garden hose rigged to a water tank in 115-degree heat. I tracked every cent in my military-issued leather ledger, categorizing their expenses the way I categorized ammunition crates in my supply warehouse. Neat columns, clean rows, date amount, recipient purpose. 6 years of raw data stacked in that ledger. But for all 6 of those years, I suffered from a bizarre psychological block that I could never explain. I never once ran the sum function on that spreadsheet. I never totaled the numbers. My subconscious knew the truth long before my conscious mind could stomach it. Calculating that total meant holding up a mirror to my own blind stupidity and staring directly at the grotesque reflection of a woman who had been systematically drained dry by her own blood. I secured the ledger in my assault pack, yanked the zipper tight, and locked it away in the bottom of my footlocker. I refused to look at the cost of my own exploitation. My sanctuary was not a church. It was not a therapist's office. It was the rigid, unforgiving structure of the United States Marine Corps. On base, my worth was measured purely by my competence and my grit. When I issued a logistical command to reroute a supply convoy through hostile territory because the primary road had been hit with an IED, my Marines executed it without hesitation. No one questioned my authority. No one gaslighted me. No one whispered behind my back that I was a pathetic failure riding on a dead man's money. The profound respect I received from combat veterans who had watched me earn every single promotion through blood and sweat stood in agonizing contrast to the sneers I received at my own family's dinner table. The military provided the oxygen my family actively tried to suffocate. My ultimate anchor was Colonel Thomas Vance, a silver-haired veteran of the Judge Advocate General's Corps. A framed photograph of Frank's unit sat on his credenza beside his own Bronze Star citation. He had been there the day they folded the flag. He never offered soft pity. He never told me things would get better. Whenever the pressure of my family's demands threatened to crack my stoic exterior, I sat in his office surrounded by walls of legal texts and framed unit citations, the sharp smell of boot polish grounding my senses while he dissected my situation with the brutal clarity of a military prosecutor. During one particularly crushing month when Megan demanded I upgrade her leased vehicle because her current one was embarrassing in the school pickup line, I sat in Colonel Vance's office staring blankly at my boots. He slid a fresh cup of black coffee across his desk without a word. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing with the hard intuition of a man who had spent 3 decades prosecuting traitors and cowards. His voice dropped to a low, gravelly command. You were trained by the Marine Corps to protect this country from toxic elements, to eradicate parasites, not to bring parasites home to nurture right in your own mother's house. Do you understand a parasite is still a parasite even if they share your DNA? I locked eyes with him, feeling the weight of that statement sink through my uniform and settle into my bones like lead. He was right. I was not just a grieving widow funding a dysfunctional family. I was a commanding officer operating deep inside hostile territory without a clear extraction plan. I stood up, adjusted my cover, saluted Colonel Vance, and marched out of his office. I did not cut my family off that day. The seed was not strong enough yet. But something shifted permanently behind my ribs, a cold reclassification that would take 3 more years of abuse to fully mature. I started viewing my family not as kin, but as a compromised operational asset that needed to be audited. If you have ever sacrificed your own financial security to keep a toxic family afloat, only to be treated like a disposable ATM, hit the like button right now. Share your survival story in the comments below because we need to normalize cutting off parasites. The final escalation began 3 years into my financial servitude. I received word through the family grapevine that Wade had miraculously secured a job at a local contracting firm. Steady pay, benefits. The first legitimate income he had earned in years. I seized the opportunity and sent a calm, pragmatic text proposing he finally shoulder half of his niece's tuition. It was a perfectly reasonable logistical adjustment, a fair redistribution of a burden I had been carrying solo. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated violently across my wooden desk, the harsh, buzzing grating against my nerves like an incoming mortar warning. It was my mom. Not Wade. My mom. The supreme commander of their little extortion ring never let the foot soldiers fight their own battles. I picked up the device, my thumb hovering over the green button, bracing my mind for the blast. Her voice exploded through the speaker before I could finish saying hello. Wade is drowning, Audrey. He is your biological brother. You're military. You have a government salary. You don't have the burden of a husband and kids. Don't turn your selfishness into a problem for this bloodline. I held the phone an inch from my ear, feeling each word land like a fist against the side of my skull. She had just categorized my tragic status as a childless widow, not as a loss, not as a wound, not as something deserving of compassion, but as a convenient financial asset for the family to exploit. I gripped the edge of my desk. My knuckles went white. The wood grain pressed hard into my palms. I did not argue. I did not scream back. I engaged my tactical breathing the way I had been trained in combat stress management. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. My pulse dropped. My vision cleared. My mind ran the tactical calculus in cold clinical silence. If I cut the tuition, Megan's innocent children would be abruptly yanked from their school in the middle of a semester. If I stopped the mortgage, my mom would face eviction, and she would broadcast her suffering to every church member and neighbor within a 50-mile radius, painting me as the monster who threw her elderly mother into the streets. They knew exactly where to aim their weapons. They had mapped my weaknesses with the instinct of predators who had been feeding on the same host for years. They were using the reputations of the elderly and the futures of the young as human shields to extort my compassion. I tightened my jaw, logged into the portal, and authorized the tuition transfer without uttering a single word of protest. I spent the next 3 years brainwashing myself with a sweet, pathetic lie. I told myself that beneath the bottomless greed, beneath the manipulation, beneath the sneers and the mockery, they still loved me. But the pocket-dialed phone call I received on that Thursday night at 11:40 p.m. incinerated that lie into irrecoverable ash. I stared at the dark screen of my laptop. The transfer date for the next month's massive wave of bills was looming exactly 36 hours away, just days before my mom's extravagant 60th birthday gala. I closed my eyes. I locked my jaw. I reached across the desk, opened my banking portal, and hovered the cursor over the transfer button. My index finger rested on the mouse. I held it there for 10 full seconds. Then I pulled my hand away, closed the laptop, and set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. The next time I opened that portal, it would be on my terms. The alarm shrieked at 4:30 a.m. I killed it on the first ring, already sitting upright, my feet flat on the cold floor. My internal military clock had been awake for 20 minutes before the device confirmed it. I laced up my running shoes, pounded out 10 miles on the dark pavement, while the streetlights buzzed overhead, and stood under a freezing shower until my skin went completely numb and my fingers turned blue. Rule number 1 of warfare emotion is not a tactical plan. To eliminate a target, you need absolute composure. I stepped out of the shower, dried off, pulled on a clean set of civilian clothes, and walked to my kitchen. I poured a fresh black coffee, sat down at my desk, and opened my banking portal. The cursor blinked on the screen, hovering directly over the confirm transfer button for Megan's rent. I stared at it. I pulled my hand away from the mouse. I did not click. I initiated a stress test on their defenses. I let Megan's rent sit unpaid for exactly 3 days, 72 hours, nothing more. Barely 2 hours into that third morning, the Supreme Commander called to execute my punishment. I answered the phone and placed it on speakerphone, resting it casually on the corner of my desk while I took a slow sip of coffee. My mom's voice shrieked through the receiver, dripping with so much venom I could practically smell it. "Audrey, what the hell are you doing with your damn military discipline? Megan's landlord just called to humiliate your sister. You're 3 days late paying the rent. Ever since you got promoted, you think you're higher priced than this house, that you have the right to stand on the heads and necks of your own mother and siblings, right?" I stared at the blinking red recording light on the phone. 3 days. That was all it took. 72 hours of a delayed payment, and she had instantly stripped me of 6 years of monumental sacrifice, reducing me to an arrogant, ungrateful villain who needed to be put back in her place. She did not pause for breath. She escalated, firing the next round before the smoke cleared from the first. "The problem lies in your condescending, ungrateful attitude toward the family that birthed and sheltered you, Audrey." She continued to scream, her tirade echoing through my quiet kitchen as she ordered me to pay the arrears before sunset. I did not defend myself. I did not mention the phone call I'd overheard 2 nights earlier. I did not remind her who actually owned the roof over her head. I did not quote the exact words she had used to mock my dead husband at her dinner table. I picked up the phone, my voice dropping to a flat, freezing baseline that I had perfected over a decade of issuing combat orders. "I will take care of it." I disconnected the call. The screen went dark. I walked straight to my steel floor safe in the bedroom closet, knelt down, spun the combination dial 3 precise turns, and pulled the heavy door open. I reached inside and extracted the thick real estate file I'd stored there 6 years ago. The cover page read, "Legal owner Audrey Offit," in bold black type. I grabbed my tactical pen. I had all the ammunition I needed. I spent the next morning drafting the notice of intent to sell at my kitchen table, legally preparing to force my mom to either secure her own mortgage to buy the house or face immediate eviction. The legal language was dense, but I had spent enough years managing procurement contracts for the Marine Corps to navigate every clause without flinching. I printed the document, reviewed every line 3 times, signed it, and set it aside. Then I returned to my laptop, opened the master Excel file I had maintained for 6 years, and did the one thing I had been too terrified to do since the day I first started tracking their expenses. I highlighted the entire column of raw data. Wade's truck payments, Megan's rent, Megan's tuition checks, my mom's utility bills, her spa treatments, her insurance premiums, her property taxes. 6 years of uninterrupted financial hemorrhaging organized in clean rows and precise columns. I pressed the sum button. The number populated the cell. My lungs physically seized. I pushed back from the desk so hard the chair nearly tipped over its legs, scraping against the tile with a sharp screech. I stared at the figure glowing on the screen. 6 digits. It was enough to buy 2 modest homes outright in cash with money left over for a new car. 6 years of my combat pay. My husband's death gratuity. Every overtime shift I pulled in a dusty logistics warehouse overseas. Every deployment bonus I earned while sleeping in body armor. All of it, every single dollar swallowed whole by people who sat around a dinner table and called me a pathetic failure while they chewed food I'd paid for with money earned in combat zones they could not point to on a map. I broke. I dropped my head into my hands and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw spots, and I wept. Not for the lost dollars. Dollars can be earned again. I wept for the slaughtered sincerity. I wept for every single time I told myself they loved me. I wept for the desecrated memory of my husband's sacrifice, a man who died at 31 years old serving his country while his widow's family turned his death benefit into their personal slush fund and mocked his grave. I gave myself exactly 90 seconds to grieve the woman I used to be, the naive, blindly loyal daughter who believed blood meant loyalty. Then I wiped my face with the back of my hand, saved the file, and printed 3 massive stacks of financial records. I organized each stack by recipient, paper clipped the summaries to the front pages, and shoved them into heavy manila envelopes. Each envelope hit my wooden desk with a sickening heavy thud that echoed through the empty apartment. Shortly after sealing the envelopes, my phone buzzed with Wade's inevitable monthly text demanding his truck insurance payment. The message was 2 sentences long, no greeting, no context, just a dollar amount and his account number. I stared at the screen. I let the message sit on read for exactly 24 hours. Then I typed a single line and hit send. I can't pay that this month. His call was instantaneous. I answered holding the phone 6 inches from my ear, already bracing for impact. He roared through the speaker, completely unhinged, his voice cracking with the desperate fury of a man who had just been told the free ride was over. Since when do you dare say, cannot, you're hoarding your dead husband's money? What are you hiding money for? To act like you're important. Don't act like you aren't a miserable failure who couldn't keep her husband alive. Audrey. I held the phone steady. My hand did not tremble. 6 months earlier, that sentence would have gutted me. It would have sent me spiraling into a guilt-soaked silence where I questioned whether Frank's death was somehow my fault, whether I was broken, whether I deserved the contempt they poured on me like gasoline. But Wade had just fired his last bullet into an empty chamber. The insult did not hurt anymore. It simply confirmed my target lock. I severed the connection with a single surgically clean strike, my voice completely flat, completely void of any emotion he could weaponize against me. All right, Wade. Good luck. I hung up, blocked his number, and picked up my black Sharpie. I wrote his name in thick ink across the second manila envelope, pressing the marker hard enough to leave an imprint on the table beneath. I did not owe him an explanation. I did not owe any of them my sanity. I stacked the envelopes neatly on my desk, aligning the edges with the precision of a supply crate inspection. 5 minutes later, my mom called. Fury radiated through the speaker before I even lifted the phone to my ear. Wade had sprinted straight to his commanding officer, crying to Mommy the way he had done every single day of his adult life. I answered, placing her on speakerphone as I packed my assault pack with the manila envelopes. She shrieked into the empty room, her voice cracking with a venom so concentrated it seemed to corrode the air itself. "After everything these old bones have done to raise you, you ungrateful brat," I let her scream. I let every word bounce off the walls of my kitchen, off the counter where I had sat in the dark 2 nights ago, listening to her call me a pathetic failure. I picked up the thickest envelope, the one containing the property deed, the notice of intent to sell, and 6 years of mortgage payment receipts, and wrote Lorraine across the front in that same black Sharpie. I zipped my assault pack shut, grabbed my car keys off the hook by the door, and walked straight to my truck. The time for tests was over. It was time for execution. I pulled into the parish hall parking lot and killed the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the glow of the party through the tall windows, gold streamers catching the overhead lights, silhouettes moving behind the glass. I grabbed my assault pack from the passenger seat, stepped out, and walked toward the entrance. My mom's 60th birthday gala was already in full swing, and every surface in that room was dripping with decorations I had unknowingly funded. Gold streamers, white tablecloths, a 3-tiered cake with Lorraine written in lavender frosting, a hired DJ playing oldies in the corner, hundreds of guest neighbors, church members, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years, all mingling beneath a massive banner that read, 60 years of blessings. I walked through the entrance in a perfectly pressed civilian suit, my assault pack slung over my left shoulder, my posture rigid, my face completely unreadable. Wade was already drunk, leaning against a stone pillar near the buffet table, lecturing a cluster of our younger cousins about something he pretended to know. He spotted me before I was 10 feet inside the door. He raised his voice deliberately, making sure every person within 30 feet could hear his mockery. "Careful there, kids. Don't offend the military ATM. My little sister is on her period these days, very sensitive." A few cousins laughed nervously. Megan was across the room, and her head snapped toward Wade so fast her neck cracked. She hissed at him through clenched teeth, terrified he would jeopardize her unpaid rent. "Know how to read the room and shut your mouth." I stood by the entrance, clutching the stack of 4 thick manila envelopes against my side. I scanned the room the way I scanned hostile terrain, identifying exits, mapping positions, counting faces. I did not react to Wade. I did not look at Megan. I simply walked forward, calm, measured, utterly lethal. Amidst the sea of fake smiles and cheap perfume, a hand gripped my elbow from behind. I turned. My 19-year-old niece, Haley, Megan's oldest daughter, pulled me gently away from the crowd and toward the back patio. Her eyes were brimming with tears she was fighting to contain. She was the only person at this entire event who had the decency to look me in the face. She squeezed my arm and leaned in close. "Aunt Audrey, are you okay? They are not allowed to speak to you with that bastard attitude. You are the only person in this house who always shows up to protect us." My chest tightened. This 19-year-old girl, standing in the shadow of her own mother's toxicity, was the absolute first person in my entire bloodline to ask if I was okay. The first one in 6 years. I placed a steady hand on her shoulder, gave her a firm nod, and held her gaze for 3 full seconds. I needed her to see exactly how a woman dismantles a toxic empire without raising her voice. We walked back inside together. The clinking of silverware died down. My mom stood beneath the massive banner at the head table, tapping her fork against a crystal wine glass until the room fell quiet. She was beaming, flushed with the attention, basking in the glow of a celebration built entirely on the back of the daughter she despised. She scanned the room, found me standing near the center aisle, with Haley at my side, and extended her arm in my direction with a generous theatrical flourish. "Now I think our daughter Audrey wants to say a few words. Come on up here, Audrey." She smiled warmly at the crowd, performing the role of the loving, supportive mother she had never once been. Hundreds of expectant eyes turned toward me, waiting for a tearful, subservient tribute. A grateful daughter thanking her resilient mother for decades of sacrifice. I released Haley's hand, gave her one final nod, and adjusted the envelopes under my arm. The walk to the front of that room was 30 feet long. I covered it in 12 steps, each one landing on the hardwood with a sharp measured strike that silenced the last murmurs in the hall like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. Every eye in the building tracked my movement. My mom was still smiling, still performing, completely unaware that the daughter she had summoned to give a grateful tribute was carrying 6 years of forensic evidence in 4 manila envelopes. I set the envelopes on the table in front of me. I looked out at the crowd. I did not smile. Thank you everyone for coming here to celebrate my biological mother. I announced, my voice resonant and level-pitched to carry to every corner of that hall. 60 years of life, truly a long journey, very much worth exposing. My mom's smile froze. A ripple of confusion passed through the front row. I selected the thickest envelope, the one with Lorraine written in black Sharpie, walked directly to my mother, and slammed it onto the table in front of her with enough force to rattle the silverware. Mom, this is specifically for you. Inside this envelope is the official property deed for the house you are living in. It has been legally under my name for 6 years now, ever since the day I used Frank's death gratuity to buy it and save you from the streets. Tonight, in front of all witnesses, I am serving you with a notice of intent to sell. The house goes on the market tomorrow morning. You have exactly 30 days to secure your own mortgage and buy it from me. If you cannot qualify on your own merit, you will be evicted by the new buyers and lose your resilient home forever. I stepped back from my mother, picked up the next 2 envelopes, and tossed them onto the table directly in front of my siblings. Wade's drunken smirk had been surgically removed from his face. Megan was gripping the edge of the table with both hands, her knuckles bone white. Wade, Megan. Inside is the entire audit record, every truck bill, every month's rent, the tuition that I have signed checks to pay for my biological brother and sister for the past 6 years. I paused, letting the silence press against the ceiling. Every person in that hall was holding their breath. Throughout the past time, I have always been cursed behind my back, humiliated by my own flesh and blood on secretly recorded videos, that I'm a miserable failure who couldn't keep her husband alive, and that I should feel grateful for serving this family. Therefore, I am utilizing this party to make the books transparent to see who exactly is the parasite living on whose back. My mom violently shoved her chair backward, the wooden legs screeching against the polished floor with a sharp, ugly screech that cut through the stunned silence like a siren. She leaped to her feet, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unhinged rage, every pretense of the warm, nurturing matriarch incinerated in a single second. "How dare you!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, spit flying from her lips. "You think you have money? You have the high and mighty right to trample on the person who gave birth to you? You bastard, you attention-hungry, ungrateful child." Wade crumpled his envelope in his fist and lurched forward from his pillar, nearly toppling a tray of desserts. A few trashy receipts. "You always think you're better than your brother and sister." Megan collapsed into her chair, her legs giving out beneath her. She ripped open her envelope with shaking hands, pulled out the audit summary, and stared at the total, printed in bold type, at the bottom of the page. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The entire banquet hall was frozen, hundreds of people watching the matriarch they had just applauded lose her mind in real time, her venomous true nature erupting in front of every neighbor, every friend, every church member who had believed her resilient story for 6 long years. I did not raise my voice by a single decibel. I stood tall in the center of their hurricane, an immovable structure absorbing every blow without shifting an inch. "I do not demand a word of thanks," I stated, my voice slicing through their screaming like a clean surgical cut. "I am simply so sick and tired of taking my hard-earned sweat and blood money to buy tickets, to be the clown for my own family." One, from the back of the room, an elderly neighbor, a woman who had attended my mom's barbecues and listened to her boast on the porch for years, muttered loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Good Lord, the daughter they called a miserable failure is exactly the one who has broken her back feeding this house all these years." Heads turned. Murmurs spread like fire through dry grass. Haley broke ranks from the side of the room, crossing the dead-silent dance floor with her chin up and her fists clenched, and planted herself firmly at my side. She gripped my hand and squeezed hard. I looked down at her, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt the presence of someone who shared my blood and actually deserved it. I dropped the final envelope onto the cake table, right beside the three-tiered monument to my mother's fraudulent glory. All payments will terminate on the 1st. The house is yours now. Good luck keeping it resilient like how you always tell it. I turned my back on them. I turned my back on Lorraine's shaking fists. I turned my back on Wade's drunken, stammering threats. I turned my back on Megan's hysterical sobbing. I marched straight through the double doors, Haley matching my stride step for step. It was the most flawless tactical withdrawal of my entire career. Within weeks, their fraudulent empire crumbled. Without my credit score propping up her existence, she could not secure a single loan to buy the property. The house was sold to a cash buyer within 45 days. My mom was forced to frantically liquidate her furniture, dragging couches and dining room sets out to the curb for a desperate yard sale, while the neighbors who had heard the truth at the gala drove past without stopping. Not one of those neighbors offered to help. Not one of them pulled over to buy a lamp or a chair. She stood on that porch she used to boast from alone, watching her possessions sit unsold with yellow price stickers peeling off the fabric. She was finally paying for her own life, and she could not afford a single month of it. Wade's truck was repossessed on a Tuesday morning. 2 men from the bank showed up with a flatbed tow truck, hooked chains under the rear axle, and dragged his shiny, polished ego out of the driveway while he stood on the porch in his boxer shorts, screaming obscenities at their taillights. The neighbors across the street watched from their kitchen window. Nobody intervened. Stripped of the only symbol of success he had ever possessed, he vanished into a whiskey bottle and stopped returning calls from everyone, including our mom. Megan was evicted from her luxury apartment within 60 days, forced to pack her children's belongings into garbage bags and move into a run-down apartment complex on the south side of town where the hallway lights flickered and the stairwell smelled like mildew. She took a job scrubbing bathroom floors at a budget hotel, her first taste of manual labor after an entire decade of feeding off my sacrifice. Her knees hit cold tile at 6 every morning. She learned what exhaustion felt like. They had destroyed themselves. I did not look back. The smear campaign they launched was ferocious. They called every relative in the extended family, every church member, every mutual acquaintance who would listen, labeling me a cold-blooded traitor who had humiliated her own mother at her birthday party, a heartless soldier who valued money over blood. It was entirely useless. Hundreds of people had witnessed the undeniable paper trail truth at that gala. They had seen the envelopes. They had seen the numbers. They had watched the matriarch scream, "Ungrateful brat," at the only person who had kept her housed and fed for 6 years. I did not spend a single ounce of energy defending myself. I moved to a secure apartment closer to the base, a 1-bedroom with clean white walls and wide windows. I furnished it myself. A solid oak desk, a sturdy bookshelf, a coffee maker that brewed exactly 2 cups because I only needed to feed 1 person now. For the first time in 6 years, I woke up on the 1st of the month, opened my laptop, poured my coffee, and sat in absolute, glorious silence. The banking portal was open. My checking account balance glowed on the screen, and for the first time in 72 months, every dollar in it belonged to me. There were no transfers to authorize, no routing numbers to enter, no invoices to cross-reference, no text messages demanding emergency funds, no sobbing phone calls at 2 in the morning. The parasitic drain was permanently severed, and the silence it left behind was the cleanest sound I had ever heard. 2 months later, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Carol, the same aunt whose pocket dial had started everything. I opened the message and read it slowly. "You did the right thing, Audrey. I apologize 1,000 times because I didn't have the courage to do what you did." I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling a brief flicker of something that might have been pity before my discipline took over. She had sat at that dinner table and listened to them mock me. She had heard every word. She had known the truth for years, and she had chosen silence because silence was easier than courage. I typed a short reply and hit send. "Thank you, Aunt. I acknowledge it." Understanding her cowardice did not mean I would ever grant her clearance back into my inner circle. I deleted the conversation thread and set my phone face down on the table. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the leather ledger I'd carried for 6 years. I ran my thumb across the worn cover, feeling the cracked grain where the binding had softened from years of handling. Every page inside was filled with clean rows of numbers. dates, amounts, recipients. The complete financial record of my exploitation. I flipped to the final page, picked up my tactical pen, and wrote a single entry at the bottom of the last column, terminated. I closed the ledger, placed it flat on my desk, and opened my laptop one last time. I navigated to the master Excel file, the one with the sum figure that had made my lungs seize. I highlighted the entire workbook. I pressed delete. The screen went blank. 6 years of data erased in a single keystroke. I closed the laptop and set it aside. My world was small now. Colonel Vance checked in once a month with a phone call that lasted exactly 4 minutes because old soldiers do not waste words. He never asked how I was feeling. His gravelly voice would simply crackle through the speaker. Are your finances secure, Captain Boundaries holding? Do you require JAG counsel? That was love in a language I understood. Haley texted me every Sunday without fail, updating me on her college courses, sending me photos of her dorm room, asking for advice on everything from study habits to how to handle a difficult roommate. She visited once a month, and we cooked dinner together in my small kitchen, talking about her future, while the dishes piled up in the sink because neither of us wanted the conversation to end. My true family fit in a single room. It was incredibly small, and it was entirely real. I placed my tactical pen on top of the closed ledger, aligning it perfectly along the spine. The same pen I had clicked in the dark kitchen on the night of the pocket dial. The same pen I had gripped in the bank manager's office when I signed the mortgage. The same pen I had used to write Lorraine across the front of the property deed envelope. It had been my anchor through every betrayal, every silent payment, every swallowed insult. I set it down. My ledger was closed. My safe was empty. My bank account was finally completely irreversibly mine. If you are out there right now silently carrying the crushing weight of a toxic family, absorbing their abuse while funding their survival, consider this your official order to retreat. You have the absolute right to terminate your service. Drop that heavy pack into the dirt, turn your back on the exploiters, and walk away. Your life, your resources, and your peace belong to you. Defend them. If my story gave you the courage to finally draw a hard line with the parasites in your own life, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below telling us what boundary you are going to set today, because your peace of mind is worth fighting for.